the door was open. I just went back and reread my speech on the floor because the gentleman, I hadn't done that yet. I went back and reread my speech on the floor. I stand by every word of that speech. And in it, I referenced the fact that I had just a few months prior had been in agreement with some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle with respect to January 6th, which there's disagreements on our side of the aisle on some of that with respect to the votes at the time. And that I'd taken very strong disagreement and sought apology from our colleague on our side of the aisle about some of the remarks that were said, but felt that this was not the right path to go down.
The House chamber was tense the moment Ilhan Omar took the floor. Her voice carried determination as she spoke about injustice, inequality, and what she described as deep-rooted bias in American politics. But behind her confident tone, many lawmakers sensed something else, a familiar effort to avoid accountability for her earlier controversial remarks. Chip Roy listened quietly, his focus unbroken. With every word Omar delivered, the atmosphere in the room grew heavier. Everyone could feel the rising pressure, a sense that this was no longer just another debate. What began as a routine discussion was turning into one of the most charged confrontations Congress had seen in years. When Chip Roy finally stood to speak, the entire chamber fell silent. His calm, steady presence commanded attention. Without raising his voice or resorting to theatrics, he began to carefully take apart Omar's arguments. Roy accused her of using emotional appeals to distract from a record that had divided rather than united. He reminded everyone that real leadership isn't about portraying oneself as a victim. It's about standing for truth and integrity, even when it's uncomfortable. His words struck a chord as he pointed to specific instances where Omar's remarks had offended allies and disrupted unity in the House. Roy's tone remained composed, but his delivery was razor-sharp. Each sentence landed with purpose, leaving little room for rebuttal when it was attained again. Omar responded with visible emotion. She thanked the committee for the hearing and spoke about the challenges she had faced throughout her life: discrimination, hate speech, and threats because of her background. As a Black, Muslim woman who came to the U.S. as a refugee, she described a lifetime of hardship and prejudice. Her words carried raw sincerity, and for a brief moment, the room listened in silence. But that calm didn't last. Feeling cornered by Roy's remarks, Omar fired back with renewed intensity. She accused him of representing a system that ignored and misunderstood marginalized communities. Her frustration spilled out as she called Roy a symbol of privilege and political arrogance. The chamber gasped as her comments echoed through the hall. Though her supporters cheered her courage, many in the room were stunned. Instead of strengthening her position, her personal attack seemed to make things worse. Deepening the divide that had already formed, the response was immediate and chaotic. Lawmakers began shouting over one another as Roy demanded order and respect for the chamber. The speaker's gavel struck repeatedly, but it barely contained the uproar. The tension had reached its peak. This was no longer a policy disagreement, but a full-blown breakdown of decorum on the House floor. Reporters rushed to capture every second, realizing they were witnessing a defining political moment. That Roy's supporters accused Omar of disrespecting Congress, while her defenders argued she was being unfairly targeted. But one thing was clear: the air in the chamber was electric. What had started as a discussion about principles had spiraled into a confrontation that would be remembered for years to come.
Mr. Speaker, we've heard from my colleagues the reasons why the Representative Omar should be removed from this committee. But I feel like all the reasons have not just yet been stated, which is why I rise to add for the record. We've heard about the comments that were made regarding anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli views, but I rise to add to the record that as a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I've sat there and heard the representative actually spew anti-American rhetoric as well. I've been in that committee room where the representative equates Israel and the United States to Hamas and the Taliban. Absolutely unacceptable for a member of that committee. I've also heard the representative equate that it is the United States' fault that there is turmoil in Venezuela.
When the session finally resumed, Chip Roy delivered the speech that would come to define his career. Speaking with steady focus and conviction, he laid out a detailed account of Ilhan Omar's most controversial moments in Congress. He revisited her past remarks about national events and her sharp criticisms of U.S. foreign policy. not to attack her personally, but to make a larger point. Roy made it clear this wasn't about race, religion, or background. It was about respect for the institution, honesty in leadership, and accountability to the American people. As he continued, his tone grew stronger. If we can't hold ourselves to a higher standard, he said, how can we expect the public to have faith in us? The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Every statement struck with precision, and even those who had once stood firmly behind Omar appeared visibly unsettled. The chamber fell completely silent, realizing they were witnessing a turning point, a moment that would be remembered long after the hearing ended. In the minutes that followed, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. Lawmakers who had once defended Omar began to quietly step back. The energy in the room was no longer centered on political loyalty. It was about protecting the dignity of Congress itself. Chip Roy's calm but forceful remarks had reset the tone of the discussion. Behind closed doors, hushed conversations began. Questions about whether Omar's repeated outbursts and controversies had finally crossed a line. For years, she had faced criticism and managed to recover, often turning challenges into political strength. But this moment felt different. The silence around her grew heavier with each passing minute, and even some of her closest allies hesitated to come to her defense. A sense of finality filled the room, as though everyone understood that something significant had just changed.
Could associate myself and do with all the remarks the gentleman from South Carolina. I have very strong disagreement with a lot of the statements that Representative Omar has made. We've covered most of them. That some people did something is the one that really sticks in my craw pretty strongly. Raises a whole lot of flags for me. I think there are significant amount of justifications to raise issues with respect to service on the Foreign Affairs Committee, but I would not go down this road. But I'm also reminded, in August of 1993, Juan Gonzalez was a batter for the Texas Rangers and was plunked by Alex Fernandez from the White Sox. And just a little bit later, Robin Ventura came to the plate for the White Sox, and Nolan Ryan was on the mound. And Robin knew what was about to happen. Nolan plunked him. And then Robin Ventura charged the mound, and then Nolan Ryan beat the crud out of him on the mound. That's what happened. We all know that's what happened. It's old school baseball. Nolan Ryan defined old school baseball. This is raw politics. That's what this is. When the doors opened, then there's a question, and you have to decide what you're going to do. We're not going to unilaterally disarm. Just not going to do it. I'm tired of that. It just is what it is. Guys took a shot at someone on our team, about statements I disagreed with, and took very much to task. But I've got strong disagreements with Representative Omar. I would prefer, if it were just starting from scratch, I would not choose this path. I'd just say whatever stuff you all want to say. We'll say whatever stuff we want to say. Our manager pick our team. Let's go battle it out in committee. That's what I would say. I would say that's the right place to be. But at this point in time, it is my considered judgment that, like Nolan Ryan, we've got to respond. And I'm just going to be blunt and honest about it. That's just my belief. I think it's important.
The next day, Congress gathered again under intense national scrutiny. The country was watching closely, and one question echoed across news networks and living rooms alike. Would there be consequences? Chip Roy took the lead, standing firm in his belief that Ilhan Omar's remarks had crossed the line of congressional conduct. His message was direct and unambiguous. If lawmakers could publicly insult colleagues without accountability, then the institution itself would lose its credibility and moral standing. His words sparked a passionate debate that rippled across the chamber. Some argued that removing Omar would set a troubling precedent, warning that it could silence dissenting voices. Others countered that allowing her to stay without consequence would send the wrong message to the American people, that decorum and respect no longer mattered in Congress. The division in the room was clear, but the momentum toward action was growing stronger by the minute. When Ilhan Omar took the floor one final time, her voice carried both determination and fatigue. She insisted that she was being judged unfairly, not for what she had said, but for who she was. She spoke about her difficult journey, her identity, and her commitment to giving a voice to those who often go unheard. But this time, her words didn't have the same effect. The chamber stayed quiet, not out of sympathy, but from a collective sense of weariness. Many lawmakers had heard these defenses before, and the emotional weight of the moment seemed to outweigh her plea. Her closing remarks felt less like a bold stand and more like an effort to contain the political fallout. It was clear to everyone in the room. Her once solid support had faded, and her position in Congress was hanging by a thread.
It is not because of the oppressive socialist and communism that has spread throughout Central and South America and Venezuela at the hands of the Maduro and Hugo Chavez regimes. That is unacceptable. And as a New York representative, to hear the representative belittle, to try to diminish the worst terrorist attack on United States soil on September 11, 2001, as some people did something, that is unacceptable as well. And I hold the same standard for this side of the aisle that I do the other, because when another colleague on my side said something about 9/11, I also voted to have her removed from the Education Committee because I thought that was inappropriate. So I'm being consistent here, and I hope my colleagues will do the same to show that this is about consistency and accountability, because we should not have an individual with those views on the committee that is tasked with representing our country and our Congress to foreign nations. I yield back.
When the Speaker finally called for a vote, the entire nation tuned in. Every news channel carried the moment live as names were read one by one. The chamber was tense, the air thick with anticipation. Each vote echoed across the hall until the outcome was unmistakable. Ilhan Omar was officially removed from her committee seat. It was a stunning moment, marking one of the most dramatic falls from power in recent congressional memory. Applause broke out from Chip Roy's side of the aisle, while others sat quietly, processing what had just happened. This decision went far beyond party lines or political rivalry. It was about restoring a sense of accountability, the principle that no lawmaker, regardless of influence or popularity, is above the standards of the institution they serve. For many, it symbolized a shift, the end of an era where heated rhetoric went unchecked and words carried no consequence. In the days that followed, the fallout was enormous. News outlets replayed the confrontation on a constant loop, breaking down every word, every glance, every moment of tension. Supporters of Chip Roy hailed him as a leader who stood firm in defense of integrity and respect within Congress. Critics, however, argued that the move had gone too far, calling it a political statement disguised as discipline. Across the country, Americans debated what had truly taken place. Was this justice being served, or simply another example of political theater? Whatever the interpretation, one fact was clear. The exchange between Chip Roy and Ilhan Omar had become a defining chapter in congressional history. It reminded the nation that words still matter, and in Washington, actions now come with real consequences.